Hey there, for this video I've put together some really tiny little lanterns for my Red Dead Redemption build. I've just made them from little objects that I could find that were the right shape and the right size. I hope that you get something out of this because anyone who makes these will find that it's different from the ones that I made because you're going to be sourcing different objects to do this. But do remember that whatever you use, as long as it's the right size and the right shape, it should work out. I do hope you find this useful and I hope you enjoy the video. To make these tiny little lanterns, I've just come up with some objects that I could assemble that would be as close as possible to the shape of a lantern. And these are what I used. The original one I made, I didn't have beads, so I used a glue stick. And for the little handles and the hanger on the top, I just used some earrings, little wooden beads that also go on the top. They just go above the little bead or the glue stick that I used originally, and some polymer clay that I will slice the ends off to make a base. It's very basic, but this is as close as I could get. I'm going to show you how to do this one. I mean, you would really want to use beads if you possibly can. I found doing it this way the first time I did it, it was so easy, and yet after that it took me 2 days to try and recreate them again. So last resort, use a glue stick. Just very, very gently heat the end of it. You don't want it to heat rapidly because you don't want it to drip. You want it to just barely move. So very, very lightly heat it, and then just keep hanging it and dangling it and being very patient with it. It's a process, this one. You can see it's sort of starting to get a little bit of its own weight to help pull it down a little faster, and then you just let it sit on a cold surface. It'll help it cool quicker, and then pull it up very, very slowly and lightly and as straight as possible. As you can see, this is just not an ideal method, but I mean, different glue sticks, different temperature, all sorts of things would come into play with this. And that's the shape I'm going for, sort of a teardrop shape. And I'll simply cut it to the length that I would like it. If you can, even find jewellery with glass beads. I'd love to have had clear glass or clear resin or a bead like that, but I couldn't get anything, so I used the glue stick and also some pearl beads that I managed to find later, because this was just not an efficient way to do this. So that's how you make the glue stick version. And then I bought these very cheap little pearl beads. The shape is what I need. The size is a little bit long, but that's something I can fix. As you can see, it's a little bit bigger. I'm just going to cut the end of it off, the top end, the more narrow end, and insert a toothpick so I can file it down and make it flat, because it's just too long. And when you're making something on such a tiny scale, the littlest thing can make the entire object look incorrect. That's nice and tidy. It doesn't look correct in the way if it was a real lantern, but on this scale and bringing it down like that makes it look correct. I'm going to sand that pearl paint off it, so it'll just be a milky kind of white. Get the brilliance off it because I don't want it to be shiny unless it was clear, which would have been ideal, but it's not. So I will make it a little more subtle so it's not quite so standing out and not looking realistic. A little bit of super glue on the toothpick and put it straight through, and then I can cut the base of it off. I'm putting the toothpick in so everything will stay in line and I don't have to handle tiny little pieces. It's like a skewer, and I just sort of skewer everything down on top of itself. And just flatten it out and give it a little bit of a flat base so when you put the bottom of the lantern on too, it'll be easier to glue down. It's a very, very fine grit of sandpaper, this one. I don't want to have grooves and marks in the plastic. And just get as much of it off as you can. You can buy these little beads online and craft stores and just about everywhere. I have seen resin ones online that are clear and the same size as these, so you'd still need to cut the top off and give them a sand, but it'd be nice to have clear little lanterns. They'd look far more realistic than the ones that I've made. And just file it down and get that shape right. It seems like a lot of mucking around, but I mean, doing the glue stick method is very, very, very tricky. So, because I cut out the 2 days of me trying to make the glue bead. So do go this method if you can. I can't stress that enough. A little wooden bead on top as well. You just slide it over there, and that way everything's perfectly lined up. But before I do that, I'm going to just do a little crisscross on it. It's that like little cage that holds the glass of the lantern in. This is a flat calligraphy pen. Any very fine tipped pen would work, as long as it's, like a permanent marker. Hold your breath and then release and hope that you don't stuff it up. When I do things like this, I always have something at hand, like a baby wipe or something, ready to erase instantly mistakes that I have made. Always have a backup plan to fix your errors if you're going to do some very fiddly work like this. I'm going across the top and the bottom of the cross that I'd made on the other side, just so I've got my little point to draw back to make it as even on both sides as possible. It's a little rough, but for a second attempt it's not too bad. It's most definitely better than the first attempt. And now the little bead, I'm just going to use a paint pen and colour it in. I mean, a black bead of course would be far better if you get one, but I also tried to avoid using things that were shiny. Say if it was a black plastic bead, it would be very shiny. If I used a black button on the base, it would be very shiny. So a paint pen on top of a bit of wood, it gives you a better effect. So a little black wooden bead would be even better if you can get one of those. I'm sure you'll come up with all sorts of little objects that you can use to replicate the method that I've used in my video. It's coming together. Now it's time to put the base on. I used some black polymer clay. I made very small little balls of it, as round as I could get them, and then just very gently rolled my finger across just to make a little bit of a round-ended sort of sausage shape, a cylinder with rounded ends, very slightly rounded, just so I have a little bit of a downward angle. I'm struggling to explain what I mean, but I'm just trying to mimic the shape of a lantern. And when you do this too, use a real reference. Pull up an image of an actual lantern and look at it. And then you'll see where I'm coming from. It's that slight shape I'm going for, just slightly rounded. It's a little crude, but it works. I've baked it in the oven, and now I'm going to cut the end off. I just gently roll it and score it under the knife first. If I just try and hack through it, I'd probably cut it at an incorrect angle. And then just give it a press down and go through, and it is a little rough looking. But at this scale, everything that is even slightly off will look a lot more off than it normally would, but just because it's so tiny. And that's the little flat bottomed, rounded piece. As you can see, when it goes on like that, it doesn't look too bad. Definitely looks like a lantern now. Now before I go and glue the bead down, I'm going to just trim that off. I want to be able to have it lined up and put onto the toothpick, but I also want a recess in the top where I can insert the little piece of the earring, so it's still also going to be lined up. I really want this all lined up as neatly as possible, because if it's even a little bit wonky, it's going to look bad. So I slightly straighten the earring out and then just hack it off with a little pair of pliers. That little piece comes away. Probably save that for something else. And then just that little tiny copper bead with the little the ring on it. And that's the bit that I want to glue together. So I was going to glue these two together first. And then just insert it into this little recess, and then that's nicely lined up, no mucking around. It didn't fall off or anything because, you know, it was able to sit in there. Now let's put the little arms on the lantern. I'm going with the shape that already came with these earrings. It's got a natural sort of bend, but it's going to need another little bend in it. So that's it cut off. Two of them are exactly the same length, if you can get them. The same length. This is the fiddliest thing I've ever made. And then just a little bend at the top of the other end of the arm. So you've just got that little, you know, that little shape of a bend at both ends, top and bottom. It's not greatly accurate, but at this size, it's about the best I could do. I'm just using some golden brown paint because I didn't have any copper coloured paint. And I'm just going to make a little tiny knob on the bottom of the lantern. I'm just blending them together and scraping it up and putting a speck of it on my finger just so I can gather it back up neatly on the end of the toothpick. And then gently hold my breath again and just drop it down and make a nice tiny little perfect circle. It's the tiny little details that really make it good. More earrings. These little things are so cheap. I just I spotted the shape on the front of these, and I thought they'd be excellent for a wall hanging to put the lantern on. I probably should have used copper coloured ones, but these will do. You can see I've just cut it away. Use the little loop that came with it, and I'll put the lantern onto the loop and then onto a little wall hanging. I put it here. It's incorrect for the building in the game, but I couldn't get my hand in there. I had nowhere else to put it. I really struggled getting it in here. But it looks really nice. Very, very tiny. Very, very fiddly. But now it's finished, I'll say it's worth it. When I was making it, I was wondering why I was putting myself through that kind of torture. But hey, the video makes it look easy. But yeah, no, and this is a guide, so you'll find things that are probably a lot easier to assemble than what I did, because I'm not really willing to buy things, especially online. So make it as easy as you can. But they do come out looking really lovely. They are so small, and they really they just add a really nice, different kind of little detail for this building. I hope you got something out of this, and I hope you do find ways of making these from all sorts of little objects. Just, you know, look, just really, really look, and you'll see these little objects come together in one piece, and they'll make a lantern in your head, and you'll know what to get and what to do. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I do hope to see you next time.